To order and ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and thanks for coming. This is the first of, I hope, several different opportunities for the town to give us information, give us opinions, share discussion, and help us work towards our objective. Before I begin, even though the whole night is about public comment, is there any public comment from the board? Any public comment from the public? Okay. We have one agenda item. We have a request to approve an alternative date for the toll booth fundraiser for the upcoming weekend in the event of inclement weather. We received a note that if the police feel that it's unsafe to do the boot drive, they would like to push it off 1 week and do it same time, same place the following week. So could I have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the alternative date for the Salvation Army toll booth to next week in the event of inclement weather. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to the town manager to tell us what we're going to do.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. You're welcome. And this is the first of the series of charrettes, like Chairman Toll said. This is Heather Lemieux, the town manager. And with me tonight to facilitate the discussion is Land Use Director Adam Burney. And the Board of Selectmen are the hosts of the meeting. So just to give you a little background on the history of why we're here tonight, back in 2013, the Building Reuse Committee was formed. And their goal was to look at the reuse and future use of certain town buildings, including the Town Hall, the TC Patios, the Brooks House, the Eagle House, Ritter, and the old primary school. The Building Reuse Committee dissolved earlier this year, and from that point on, the Board of Selectmen, they made it one of their goals to look at an infrastructure plan for town facilities, including town buildings and land. So back in August, they held their first workshop and had another one in November, and we had a detailed meeting on a report on town buildings in September. And since that point, there's been many discussions on town buildings, including at special town meeting, which 7 out of the 20 articles was based on town buildings and land in one way or another. So the charrette is a reason to hear more input from the public and increase public participation. So many may say, what is a charrette? So a charrette is a planning session where citizens, officials, and other stakeholders collaborate on a vision for development. It provides a forum for ideas and offers the unique advantage of giving immediate feedback, and participants become included in the process for developing a vision for the final design. So a quick overview. Why are we doing a charrette? This is a way to get ideas from the public on this topic to increase public participation on the future use of the town buildings and land. And all participants have a voice, so no idea is a bad idea tonight. What do we intend to achieve? To build consensus around future uses of town buildings and land, and how will this help guide the process? We'll be working towards an overall plan for our town buildings and our lands. The format for tonight's meeting: Adam will take over after this slide and discuss how the Village Center District and Architectural Preservation District impacts the use of buildings and land. He will discuss a thought exercise session, and then we'll break out into smaller groups of 4 to 5 people. And I urge people to get in a group where you may not know someone. So your interaction will be different. You hold different ideas from each other. The facilitator will pose talking points that the small groups will discuss, then report back to the larger group. And then the larger group will have a collective discussion. Then there will be an envisioning session where we'll utilize maps to draw out your group's vision for the town center. And then each group will present their ideas for town center at the end, and there'll be a large group discussion. And then, Adam?
So before I start, I think to sort of piggyback on what Heather said, when you get into your small groups, pick one person to be the facilitator so that that person will be sort of your voice when we come back and do the large group, so that when we say, all right, we're done, we're going to start talking as a large group, you're not all looking at each other and saying, who's going to say this, who's going to say that. And it sometimes helps to have one person taking collective notes. There's a lot of whiteboard space, so please feel free to use it. And it will give you some way to record what you're talking about and something that everyone, when we start talking as a larger group, can reference. So now on to the slides. So the Architectural Preservation District and the Village Center District were passed in May of 2015. In the back corner there is a map with all sorts of fun colors on it. That is a blow-up of the map that you all should have picked up at the entrance. There's packets of the talking points and the Village District bylaw and the map. So the Architectural Preservation District is a bit larger than the Village District. So there's a black line on that map that shows the Village District. That shows the uses as they exist today in that district. Purple being institutional, which is all municipal, nonprofit, governmental, etc. uses. Green is open green space. Yellow is residential. Red is commercial. If there's a property that has two colors on it, it serves two functions. Anything that's white is a piece of property that's not currently being used in any measurable way. May have a building on it, may not, but there's no current use there. So how do these impact what we can do and what we want to do and how we look at the reuse of town buildings and the center as a whole? I'll start with the easier of the two. The Village Center District is the zoning district. There's a map on the wall to my right, some of your left. That red dot in the middle, for all intents and purposes, is the Village Center District. It is a district that's intended to be mixed use to allow for small-scale commercial development within that area as well as residential, preferably as a mixed use, in order to bring people to the downtown to engage in commerce and municipal activities and just general community. The planning board spent probably 2 years between 2013 and 2015 working on this. It was finalized, it was passed by town meeting. You all have a copy of it, or there's a copy available for everyone at the door. It lists the uses as they're allowed. So, not to say that if there's something great that everybody feels should be included in that district, it can't be changed, but as it stands now, these are the things that you can do in that area. The Architectural Preservation District is a little more nebulous in that it's more of an aesthetic preservation bylaw to retain the character and appearance of buildings in the town center to prevent historic homes, historic being, I guess the word in the bylaw is contributing properties. And that's any property 75 years or older. And if you are proposing to alter the exterior of those properties, there's a process through the Architectural Preservation District Committee that you would have to go through in order to have that approved. And they are looking to ensure that you're retaining the historic character as defined within that bylaw. And it has to do with period look and glazing and all that kind of fun, really sort of specific stuff. So there are some limitations to what buildings can have done to them on the exterior. Of the 5 buildings we're talking about that the municipality owns, that the town owns, the Ritter is the only one that, I'm sorry, not the Ritter, the TCP is the only one that doesn't qualify as a contributing property at this point in time. We're probably about 10 years away before that one kicks into contributing property status. It doesn't mean you can't do things. The Architectural Preservation District Commission does have authority over demolition. They can say you can't demolish a building, and then you have to kind of deal with that in what it is. So that sort of frames some of the conversation about what's realistic about being done. It doesn't mean there's poor ideas about demolishing or altering buildings, but it sort of puts some grounding on what we talk about as we move forward. So what I think is important is this is a part of town that's sort of the center of town. Everybody has thoughts and ideas about all of these buildings individually, collectively, maybe about the area as a whole. And I think what everybody in this room can recognize is that these buildings are having an impact on the village district and the downtown in whatever way you choose to look at it, but there's an impact. It's a large amount of property that the municipality owns. So if everyone can take a couple of minutes to sort of think back to places that you like to go, places you like to be, built environments, not the backwoods in New Hampshire or the beach, but physical environments that you like to be in. And jot down a couple of notes about things that you like about those environments. What attracts you to them? What makes you feel comfortable in them? And if you sort of keep touching back on those as you review the talking points, it's going to maybe take some of the, the Ritter's done this over all these years, and maybe help you reframe some of the way that you think about what we're looking at, what we're doing in the downtown, and how you want to frame what happens down there. As Heather said, there's no bad ideas, there's no wrong ideas, but this is, a lot of people in this room grew up in this town, a lot of people came to this town with thoughts of what downtown was and meant, and so this is sort of to pull you out of that and get you into a place thinking about what you want and what you want to move forward with, and then we can get into the talking points. So if you'll just take 2 or 3 minutes to sort of, I provided some scrap sheets at the bottom of your talking points to sort of think about those things that you like. Sure.
If anyone needs a pad or a pen, we have a pen.
You said something about the Architectural Preservation District having the ability to deny destruction or demolition.
That's right.
And I'm questioning, does their authority go beyond the demolition delay bylaw?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
That thought. So everybody seems to be sitting with people they're comfortable and friendly with, which is great.
I've never met the parents.
He has that effect on people. Everybody says that, no matter how long they've known him.
You want to be out of here.
That's fine, and it's not a value judgment. But if you are sitting with people you're comfortable with, feel free to shake it up and meet new people and introduce ideas to people you might not know. The idea of this is for everybody to be a little uncomfortable and everybody to be challenged a little bit and kind of move through your thoughts and maybe present them to people who haven't heard them or don't know them. One last thing, as we start to break out into the small groups, Emily is going to be filming. She's going to shut the microphone off just so that there's sort of a record that you guys didn't all go away and somebody made a bunch of decisions and you guys came back and talked about them. So it's really just to fill some airtime for cable. So don't worry, she's not recording what you're saying.
I thought she was going to record bits and pieces of it.
Reporting back to
The
the larger,
reporting back she's going to
larger
record.
group.
But while they're doing this, I think personally I feel
People will be less
most
inhibited.
people will be
Okay.
less
Inhibited.
Yes, less inhibited and more likely to speak their mind, knowing that some of their off-the-cuff thoughts aren't recorded. So there are a series of talking points. They're written down. We have them on a series of slides. I think I'm just going to read them from the paper because it's a little easier. So really the reason we're here is what is the future of the 5 town buildings? What do you see as the future use? can you envision any of these buildings being used non-municipally? And that doesn't mean the town selling them or giving up control of them, but the use might not be town offices. And, you know, what uses could you envision in these buildings that aren't municipal uses, if you can? What sort of services would you expect to have from contemporary municipal offices? And what would consolidated municipal offices look like to you? I don't know how many of you do a lot of business with town. I still have people come into my office looking for the library at the Ritter Building. I say at least 3 times a week someone comes in and wants to pay their taxes, and I'm happy to take their money, but I don't collect taxes. So there's a disconnect sometimes between the two buildings. What would it look like if they were together? Are there any town buildings you think should be demolished? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And if there is, what would that vacant land be used for? Would it be sold? Would it be turned into something else? Would there be a new building built? Is there interest in a community kitchen or makerspace that is either a nonprofit or municipally funded?
What's makerspace mean?
It's sort of like an incubator where you provide space for people to rent out either office or design space. Sometimes there's 3D printing involved where someone can come in and use expensive equipment that they couldn't afford, that they would then prototype something on and sort of play with it and then take it into production or present a concept to someone else. And if so, where do you think that would be ideal for this to be? And maybe it isn't downtown. Maybe it is. And what do you think the biggest problem is in, I'll say, the village district, the downtown, however you want to class it, and what are some ideas to sort of address that problem?
What's with the in a gas station? I thought the town had taken possession of that.
No, it's privately owned.
Okay.
There are, I believe, some significant taxes owed. There's some question about the environmental condition, and all the assessments that you would do on a property like that require authorization of the owner, who is incommunicado. So the town couldn't authorize or pay for what they call a Phase 1 or a 21E because it requires signature of the property owner.
Okay. And are the tanks still underground?
I believe that they are, and they've been made inert, but I don't know for sure.
That's correct.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I had heard at some point somewhere in the history of my adult life that if a property goes a certain period of time with unpaid taxes, that either somebody else can come in and pay the taxes, or the town can seize that property because of the unpaid taxes, or something like that. That it
That's
can't
correct.
just be left in perpetuity.
Well, it can. It's not necessarily always the best practice. The town needs to go through a foreclosure process to take property with unpaid taxes. Once the town takes the property, they take ownership of any problems or issues that exist with that property.
Right.
I've worked in communities where they've said, oh, well, you owe 2 years of taxes for taking that property, and they've spent millions of dollars on, environmental issues, significant environmental issues. And so I think the town has been reticent to jump into that gas station. And I think that's probably a larger policy discussion.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely is. A lot of thoughts on that.
Okay. I was just wondering. I thought we had taken control of that, but that's...
No, it's still privately owned.
So what you may have thought, there is a tax lien against the property by the town. That's a tax taking, but that's not a foreclosure. So the town has a lien, but it has not foreclosed on their right to get their property back.
Okay.
Yes.
What is the term for office space that's available to use as needed? There's a term for that. It's a sort of a new concept of
Like a co-working space?
co-working. Okay.
I think that there's a lot of different industry terms, but it's similar to an innovation space, but it's a little more directed.
I think they call it Starbucks.
No, that wouldn't work.
All right, any other questions? Go. So, you're sitting around tables.
How many people do you want?
It looks like there's probably about 16 or 17 people here, so 5 to 6 people in a group would be ideal.
Look at all of the issues.
That's good introduction, but we'll do it again if you want.
I'm John.
I'm Maureen. I'm Michelle.
Yes. My name is Doug McQuaid. I'm with Troy. Okay. I had a couple of thoughts. Help people start thinking more towards, you're too young. Our generation, you too. But they're saying about another 10, hopefully.
Put that up there, right?
What's your name?
She's videotaping us.
Oh, okay. Oh, boy. Yeah, put it on my...
Kids are walking, their parents are coming to pick them up. They're so I like open maybe 10 or 12 cars at different times, like not a ton. That would also have the parking lot, and there's nowhere else for the kids to play other than that lot, when they're playing in the park. But the space is just so small for them, the TCP.
Brooks House, what would anybody think about selling that in there? As long as a person moves. So we keep the land, they take the house, let it go. Well, structure, the foundation, the sewer, the water lines, electric, whatever comes into it. And I think one of the things for me that we talked about unifying the town business being one building. We haven't talked about
No, it's true. There's no parking at the common either. So like there's band concerts and there's elderly and
and that are not managed.
Obviously, I have a vested interest in passing this building, but whatever's best for the town is what my dad always looked at first. The one thing that has not been talked about are the offices that are down at the DPW.
I think it may in fact be
But it's not on the table.
what
You know that all of the work, there's dollar signs attached to anything and everything.
Most definitely.
Most definitely. I haven't thought, because I have a relative who did this with the Catholic school that they're running. But I didn't know if somebody was more savvy to this type of thing, that like Smile Amazon. And if we had a revolving account, that any and all money would go directly to, say, town hall, because we know in 5 to 8 years, we're going to have a major tear-down renovation that's going to be needed done. And this type of thing where money could be a portion of your sale, which is Catholic school. Yeah, I was just made aware of it. We saw every quarter, every time I buy something on Amazon, it's whatever, 5%, 10%. Really?
There is no right or wrong.
I mean, we just had a big payment, so like I said, I thought it was told that we're going to have 5, 8 year, maybe 10-year window before it needs to be stripped.
I think that we should.
If this type of thing was set up with some kind of wording going out to the general public, Lunenburg, because no matter what families, now we're how many of those done, we're going to do it anyway. So, yeah, I mean, so it's just a thought. Well, even that, tear it down, that could be done. And that could offset that.
I was told the front porch is falling off.
One of the other things.
And where would you like to
Yes,
be?
the ledger is there and John Law Services.
Is that the one that's right next to the library?
But trying to get a consensus of what we're trying to get, it's a huge difference.
The main thing is that I think that we need a financial plan
Some people think it should be a.
that we can put into the corner and say, well, if you want that, we need an override.
It's a mediation, and I had to bounce back and forth, and then I had to also deal with so when they get to point A to point B, and I know that I might have to go from window to window, or I might have to do a little bit of work, but I don't think it's reasonable to ask me to go.
You don't currently
I'm sure you
offer that.
I'm sure we could.
Additional municipal services.
I don't think there was any services that were expected. I think it's just I mean, it was just a possibility. I mean, we're not going to put it out there, right? So we could create parking.
Just to answer questions, I'm not going to interrupt people or offer my ideas. Just in the village district that I kind of touched on, as far as zoning is point, the approval in the center of town, you can make an agreement with another property within 1,000 feet. So if you can show that there's municipal parking, enough of it in your space, you can count those parking spots towards your. So as far as the zoning that's in place, someone could use town hall for something and use parking over another lot.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's that parking behind the village center building there, right? That's considered private property?
Owned by the man who owns the building, all that is behind there.
Oh, so you technically can't park there to go to town?
How are you guys doing on thinking through your talking about? You're stuck on one.
Not one.
Oh, you're stuck on one or that?
Single ones, yeah.
I'd love to have senior up in the center of town.
I'm thinking, why don't we just take it?
Pittsburgh's
Oh, really?
But,
Oh,
I mean, to put in a restaurant, facility, type of thing, would be a draw. I was about to say, just put a restaurant in.
I didn't think it was.
I think it would be really amazing.
Yeah, but the structure, you think the structure is good?
Yeah, I think we can't really make decisions until we know more, hear the results of this.
Right, so, we're trying to keep it to the 2 hours. Loxley, when the question came up at the town meeting that we just had.
Mike, yeah, he said 100, Michael Macken said 100, and Loxley put up a
The issue there is that the building, as it approaches 50 to 60 years old, has been ones today is that if you don't take care of the building, it's going to fall down and fall into itself just like the high school. We're certainly building. To answer a question, I think the thinking of the school department now is if Turkey needs to be replaced, it will be around this, at least what I think they're thinking is that that'll be around the time that the artificial track field, turf field.
We're just getting going. We're going for half an hour now.
Talking. Doing what you're asking to do.
I find it shocking that Anthony hasn't gotten the word in.
Yeah, but he saved him for a little bit.
It's 5 minutes. All right, 5 minutes and we'll get, everyone's going to... All right, far side of the room. We're going to go, we've got, who wants to be group 1?
Okay.
All right, so we're going to start, we're going to give us the highlights of, the talking points.
Okay. We didn't take votes, so this is various different things.
That's fine.
Our buildings need to be more accessible. It's a given we need to do the assessment of buildings. Concept of selling the Brooks house to somebody who is willing to move it. difficult for the town manager to manage individual department employees if they're spread out in different buildings. And if we do consolidate, consider including the offices that are down at DPW. If one administrative assistant is out, there'll be somebody else to answer the calls. Various options about the old primary, whether we could do something with it or not. We need to find out what's going on with the assessment, maybe a place to put, if we renovate, could we put kitchens there? What is the demolition cost?
That was old primary?
Yeah. At the Ritter, a distillery?
All right, hold on, let me catch up.
He remembered it.
So let's go back to old primary, because I was erasing.
Right, old primary, we need to know what the demolition costs, but also is it possible to do it, some other work to possibly put a kitchen there relating to the farmer's component. You'll hear that again at the Passios.
Okay.
Ritter Distillery or a farm-to-table restaurant. Town Hall, Arts and Cultural Center. There are grants available. What's the cost? You can hear the cost a lot. Plymouth did this with the old library. Passios. Boys and Girls Club, Senior Center activities, senior daycare, allowing seniors to share their expertise with younger people, carpentry, mechanics, things like that. At the Passios, utilize the kitchen for farmers to possibly to supply the farm-to-table restaurant.
Hold on, let me catch up. You said farmers market, supply farm table?
Farmer's kitchen.
Farmer's
kitchen, yeah. We have other administrative comments that are going to get sent to the town manager.
Can I suggest that Smile Amazon?
Oh, right. So one of the options was, how do we pay this? And Mr. McQuaid raised, Amazon allows you to set up a charity where the money from every single sale goes to that nonprofit. It could be the town of Lunenburg for a particular building or a particular use.
If somebody could be a lot smarter than I am with social.
Did they actually use that for the
PTO? I have a relative who's using it for a Catholic school down in Belchertown. And what I was thinking is that somebody could get started on that. I really don't have that type of expertise. But if it's supposedly that it's 8 years before that building falls apart or needs a complete new skin, if some kind of account like this was made up and the money went into a revolving fund that was specifically for the care of the town hall, how many people buy Amazon? And if you started now, relatively now, 8 years from now, what's the possibilities of at least having to put a big dent in fixing that building?
So one other major thing that we need to do is the concept of what does the school need for future schools, because that relates to whether we sell land or not, even if we have to tear down buildings. That's a data point that we need.
Hopefully you can translate my hieroglyphs. All right, anything else from group one? All right, that makes you guys two.
Can I just ask a question? Because the first one said consolidate, but I don't see any consolidated in the buildings.
Under these buildings?
Yeah,
you're right, it doesn't. It says they're saying consolidate for efficiency,
right.
Include DPW. I don't think that they identified a
They
building.
didn't identify the space.
They identified that consolidation was something they would
Just the
desire.
concept.
Just, yeah, correct. All right, who's your spokesperson?
Oh, it's me.
Lucky you.
So there were a lot of different ideas. being
Seeing the personalities, I find that hard to believe.
being thrown around. And I think no. I think it was really great. Because I don't think that there was any one idea that is. I certainly don't think that there was any one idea that was bad, and the thought process behind the ideas, or what was driving the ideas was well thought out. So, but to give you a consolidated list is not possible because there were a lot of ideas being thrown. So I think one thing that we all agreed on is that we need to understand how much it's going to cost to make any sort of changes to anything. I think that's probably given for anybody, but like the assessment, if we want to make changes to, if we want to demo the primary school, how much is that going to cost? And does it make sense to demo it versus renovating it for use? So understanding what the cost is going to be for any sort of renovations or movement or anything like that is number one. And then when determining the cost, determining whether or not it's financially viable as a community to, put those things into motion. So, but I think it's agreed that at least some sort of renovation needs to happen to the buildings that are there, and how that happens is yet to be determined. But so for some specific ideas,
I'm going to pause for a second. You said there's a consensus that renovation needs to happen to some or all of the building, or where financially reasonable.
All of the above. Certainly some. I think that more people than not agreed that primary should probably just be taken down because the thought behind that is that it's not going to be financially viable to renovate it in any way. And then when we're talking about tearing down the primary school, one of the things that came up several times in the discussion was using that space for municipal open space, right? So bigger areas for people to gather in an open space, whether it's helping to support a larger farmers market, festivals, thank you, festivals, what's that? Bonfires, which used to be a big thing back in the day. What was the idea that...
Dog.
Oh, dog, thank you. I do. You know what? It's on page 2.
Oh.
So, I'm sorry.
Hey, don't complain, you can be right next.
Yeah. So, potentially a dog park. Things like that.
Put it in festivals. What do we mean by festivals?
What do we mean by
Are we talking
town
unifier or like...
No.
Okay. You're talking like a day of...
Yeah. Oh, no. Like a little fair. Yeah, art festivals or things like that. Movie night, that's something that I have on my list.
I want to have clarity of what it means.
I was hoping to get Metallica back together and...
Can you bring Guns N' Roses to open for them?
So here's the funny thing. Tommy Stinson actually plays bass for Guns N' Roses, or did for a little while, and I have a connection to him. So I might be able to make that up. So. Anyway, big fans of Guns N' Roses. Farmers market was a big one that kept coming up, and something that the farmers market could help support, which Anthony said, and goes along with what you guys said, is turning the Ritter building into a farm-to-market, or farm-to-table restaurant. It is. Farm-to-table restaurant. I think the idea, what did you say? Sell it to them for $1, let them use...
Sell it for $1 a year.
Yeah.
Right? They come in, they make all the renovations, and you put the stipulation that you need to basically build this sort of a thing, right? It starts at the front end for the farmer's market, and then they basically, a lot of local folks feed their foods and their wares in through that. That serves as a retail front end, and this is going to be itself.
So are we still talking outdoor weekly farmer's market, or are we talking year-round indoor farmer's market?
Both.
Farm-to-table restaurant, I thought they said. Did you say
farm-to-table restaurant? Yeah. Which is help supported by the farmers market. The farmers market in its entirety doesn't need to not everybody that participates in the farmers market needs to support the farm-to-table market, I would say, or farm-to-table restaurant, I would think.
Farmers market that have nothing to offer, right? People, the ones that bring greeting cards, right? But the folks that bring food.
Right. Yeah. Sort of a non sequitur, I think one thing that we all agreed on is that in terms of the downtown area, not necessarily the buildings in general, but the downtown area significantly lacks in two things: parking and safety. The spaces that particularly the space where the bandstand is, that's being used for a lot of town functions, is very small, number one. Number two, it's right smack dab in the middle of two very busy roadways. There's absolutely no parking there for anybody to be able to easily access it. So I think that needs to be one of the major considerations when deciding what we're going to do with the town center.
So safety is not you're going to get mugged or beat up.
Absolutely not. You're going to get hit by a car.
Pedestrian facilities specifically.
Correct.
Correct. Crosswalks, there's no lighting.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Yeah.
What about moving the gazebo over to the primary?
Well, so I mean there's no reason. I think that because the gazebo is where it is, and the gazebo, is a structure that sort of lends itself to gatherings, right, or performances for the high school band and stuff like that. The things just tend to happen there because that's where it is, that's where it's located. But yeah, certainly if it was moved to a safer location, it would make it better for everybody. Brooks House.
Hold on.
Level and plant a tree.
Just one.
Just one.
Just one tree?
Two trees.
You can't afford that.
Very small.
Conservation wants to ask.
So collectively, you feel love for
No church meeting.
I would.
How about sell it while somebody moves?
What's that?
Sell it while somebody moves it?
Yeah.
Even if you sell it for a buck, take it.
Like we do with the Ritter. There were differing opinions about whether or not it would be better to consolidate versus to consolidate the town offices into one building, or to keep them in the buildings that they're in. There was actually a different idea presented. Most of the conversation about consolidation has been around TC Passios. There was actually an idea brought up about consolidating actually into town hall. What's that? Yeah, and using the second floor, because right now it's full of boxes and
open space, right? It's still
right.
meeting room. So basically, build that into an office or into offices, and all of the boxes and rooms that you guys have of records, digitize them all.
Can't.
Why?
State doesn't accept digitized records as permanent records.
Yeah, I'm not saying throw them out. You can go iron out them and put them in long-term, off-site storage.
That's
and
that cost too.
whatever. Right, Lunenburg public storage, right? Feed the engine. So you can keep it local, but you can have it at your fingertips 24/7.
Remember, no idea was a bad idea, right?
Exactly.
How long does the town have to keep records?
Depends on the record. Building permits we're supposed to keep until the building no longer exists. Planning records we're supposed to keep one copy in perpetuity. Personnel records have a different length. Financial records have, I think it's 7 years in most cases.
After the project's done.
Yeah.
Birth, death, and marriage records are permanent.
Forever
Yeah.
and perpetuity.
So there's a lot of permanent records.
Town meeting records are forever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things.
But get them off-site. There's no room. There's no room there.
Most of them are going off-site currently.
Perfect.
To the TCP.
To the
TCP.
Which is off-site.
Yeah.
And free.
So, was there a consensus that consolidation was good or bad, or was it just kind of neutral?
I think there were arguments for both sides. I think the majority would agree that consolidation is probably a little bit better of an option, but it was relatively split, I think.
Money.
A couple ideas for TC Passios, other than as a consolidated location for town offices, was to turn it into a community classroom space. Right? Have wood shops in there, kitchens, things like that, art studios, I don't know, other ideas.
Charter school.
Right, getting to that.
I'm
Hey,
sorry.
don't take over my job.
He's the best. Don't get the right one.
You know, but a location where people in the community who have a place to go to be able to, you know, to offer, you know, classrooms or workshops or something like that.
So almost like a community center.
Yeah, sure. Or turn it into a charter school, or offer it up to a charter school to pay rent to it, right? That was what it was, offer it up to a charter school.
One of the ideas, I don't think that actually made it down paper, was to knock down some of the walls. I don't know if this is feasible, but to put a pool in, and make a community pool.
I don't remember you saying that.
Yeah, I thought, you didn't hear me?
You did, I didn't read your mind.
Troubles.
Interesting though that you should say that, because one of the things, so this is going to be new to my group because I didn't get a chance to tell my ideas. But one of the things that I think that is really important for creating a vibrant downtown is that it needs to be walkable. So that brings the safety stuff into an issue. But you need to give people a reason to go there. And I think that that can be a combination of things. I think that we can find a balance between municipal, open, green space, and commerce. But I think you have to be really careful about the kind of commerce that you bring into a small town. I certainly don't want to see a Home Depot or a Kohl's or anything like that go in, but I think having, you know, the setting is a little bit different, but over Thanksgiving, I went to visit some family, and we went to a very small town just south of Buffalo that was such a quaint little town. They do have a ski slope there, so no, not Chautauqua, near there, Ellicottville.
Yes.
Right. So it supports. So it is technically a ski town for an incredibly small mountain. So I don't know if you can really consider it. Yeah. Right. But the town itself was tiny, bigger than ours, but still very tiny. But it had such a vibrant downtown community of artist shops, antique stores, restaurants. You know, things like that, and it was completely walkable. Everything was right there within like a 3 to 4 block, not even 4 blocks, like 3 block radius, and it was beautiful, and it was booming when I was there. So I think you need to give people a reason to come in, and I think that green space is great, and I love green space, and I have a lot of ideas for different green space. But I think that green space isn't going to be the only thing that brings people there, especially in the wintertime. So I think having some commerce in town center is something to explore.
And I think I'll encourage you to read the village district bylaw because it addresses a lot of what you're talking about, and it limits commercial uses to 5,000 square feet or less unless they're in an existing building that was there prior to the adoption of the bylaw. So
that
essentially TC pass use. So, I mean, unless they're building like pocket Home Depots, which they have done in some communities, like there's some places where stores just want to be and they jam some special weird concept in, you know, like the fish shanty that McDonald's built on the Cape. But that's not there unless there's a reason that they really want to be there. So the idea when the planning board put that together was to do just that, to encourage small, local, artist-based, service-based shops that would service the people there. So if you didn't pick it up, it's at the door. You know, read through it. I think it fosters some of what you're talking about. And I think what's important also to note is the town sets the table, and private entities have to do the development. The town doesn't say, oh, we're going to put a jewelry shop in. And so it's all of you folks, the people you know, who encourage people to come and do those kind of things. So that's just a plug for the bylaw, just a bit of information.
But what led me down this road was the mention of the pool. And so one of the things that I'm definitely an advocate for is open green space, but I think that you need more than just a playground and an empty field. You need to have like baseball fields or soccer fields or splash pads, which kids love, right? And as an adult with kids on a hot day, I love going to the splash pad with them. But having like a community pool, I know that we have, sorry.
I was going to say, they got rid of community pools in Pittsburgh and put in all those splash pads because a person drowned.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Newburyport has splash pads, and they've done it in such a beautiful way. It's very similar. I mean, Newburyport has walkable shops everywhere, and they have areas that are no cars and just walkable areas, and then areas that there are cars. But they've incorporated green space that they do concerts and festivals, and they have a splash pad, and it's just amazing.
Rose Kennedy Park.
Right?
I know, I'd be doing
And then the last thing I want to mention, I'm sorry, the last thing I want to mention that got brought up a couple of times towards the end was having, I guess there was the talk of, like a senior living community, right, that had originally been talked about at the primary school, recognized that it wasn't feasible, but, you know, maybe it's not feasible to renovate primary to put it in there, but is the idea of bringing in some sort of senior living facility for Lunenburg residents who have been here their entire life and want to stay here, but need help feasible.
So are you
Giving them the option to
talking
stay.
scaling down, or are you talking like assisted? Or some combination?
Maybe some combination.
They'll need a splash pad too.
They would.
You write
Oh,
splash pad.
I'm sorry.
Put active open space.
And then this goes into an idea that I have for TC Passios is creating combining both the concept of bringing senior citizens and preschoolers together. I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of the stuff that goes around online where they have programs set up where they combine senior centers and preschools, and I mean, it's just amazing to see how those two groups interact together and how vibrant and how lively things become when you get these two groups together. So doing something like that in TC Passios, I think
Multi-age learning and service?
We talked about that as well with the Boy and Girls Club and the senior daycare.
Yeah.
Because we were saying to meld those two things would be amazing. Because, and we've seen it in the Girl
No, I have a
Scouts.
real question though. You have to quarry the seniors? No, I'm for real.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a lot of, like,
Yeah.
it would be
For
a
sure.
very legal process to combine those two.
Yeah.
We can't just throw them together.
But that goes on the news tonight, ABC had an article, the fact that in another 10 years, 25% of the population of the United States is going to be 65 and older. And we're not going quietly.
Right on, brother.
Miss Adams?
I have a real question, and it's so tame that people don't take me seriously, but my real question is, we have a lot of private property and a lot of vacant spaces existed on those private properties. And if this vision is possible, why hasn't it occurred already? Like, what's going to change?
Well,
And why does it need to require municipal land?
That's kind of a nebulous question. So we do have a lot of private property. The village district is 2 and change years old. So when we were finalizing the village district and everything that I said, it's a 15 to 20 year term for people to start really doing that stuff and have it sort of start to realize its full vision. Because nothing happens quickly. We're not a booming economy. We're not a dense downtown area. There's not a lot of people here during the day. On the weekends, you get the church crowd, you might get people who pass through, maybe for school events. So it's really just there's a sowing of seeds. People have to start to be successful here. We've seen that with Dragonfly over the past 6 months or so. They've really started to be successful. And then the next person says, oh, well, I'm going to take the chance, and the next person takes the chance. And so it takes time. So you mentioned there's a lot of vacant space.
Vacant office spaces and...
Okay, so there are some vacant spaces in the village. I think there's probably, we met with them, Heather, about 4 or 5 months ago. There's 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of vacant space in there.
Right.
And I think,
village?
Yeah. I think some of that is the property owner isn't particularly enthusiastic about advertising his space. He tries to do it all word of mouth.
Doesn't want to pay a commission.
And the space is in various states of repair. And people are concerned that they can't be seen there. They were just approved for a freestanding sign on Mass Ave, so maybe people will feel more exposed and be more likely to locate there. But again, if he's not out there actively beating the bushes trying to get tenants, then people don't know the space is there.
The other part of it, in my opinion, is the community has to have an investment in making this happen. And I think that the community has to contribute something. So the areas we've talked about that have splash pads, or have community spaces, that have festivals, they've made a commitment and an investment into making the area attractive to bring business. And I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay, and I have somebody who couldn't make it tonight, and she shared a lot of what Paula just said in terms of not necessarily that maybe necessarily we can't change the space, but we can change
We can change the
way we
areas
want to
around
be
it, correct.
perceived. And it's really diving into that farmer, enhancing farmer. Because somebody has to come and invest. But the thing is, I don't understand why it has anything to do with municipal land.
Well, I think some of the stuff that the town can do is working on walkability and accessibility in the area. And, some of that has to come from the state as well, because they own Mass Ave.
I agree with those things.
And I think some of that is an impediment to people wanting to locate here. There isn't a dearth of parking, so people have to park someplace and get there somehow. Most people don't want to play Frogger across 2A. Most people don't want to walk from where they've parked all the way to the light, to push the button, to wait for the green light to turn so they can cross the street. So they say, I'll just drive to Hannaford or somewhere else where I can park and do whatever business I need to do there. So the town can, again, work to set the table on some of these walkability issues, but there's also then, we're still lacking parking, and there's still enticing people to want to be down there and getting people to actually patronize those businesses.
I also think that Lunenburg, to its credit, has a lot of conservation land and a lot of open space. And, I think that at one point in time we had one of the largest per capita conservation in the state. That's open space, but it was purchased for a purpose of conservation. It was purchased for a purpose of keeping it as it is. So we can't look to all of our open space and say, well, we have all this open space, why isn't it being developed for something else, when it's purchased for a specific purpose?
I just have a small hope in mind is that with the municipal land, I don't anticipate we should sell all of it or lease all of it, but we have a very unique opportunity to help spark and be the catalyst for all these things that we're looking for: walkability, vibrant downtown center, just being a spark to some of that new mixed use that we're looking for. So if we can find a portion of it that we can bear to part with or use in a unique way, we can really open the door to start utilizing the village district.
And there will be a dialogue with the private owners. And it's already started through some of the dialogue with the charrettes, with the various property owners as well. Because I think that's
all right, so that'll be a part of our center no matter what changes, and I feel like that's a really important piece of it.
We done group 2? Yes? All right, group 3. Who's
Go for it, Michelle.
I was the writer,
you're the talker.
All right, so we weren't nearly as productive as everybody else because we really got hung up on one building that we kind of all agreed is the most, what would you call it? Best condition? I don't know. TCP. I don't even have to say it. So one of the things that Tanner mentioned that really struck with all of us is highest and best use of that space, because it's the last real usable space. So across my radar at one point came the idea that part of that building would get demolished. And that, I think, and a lot of the people at the table agreed, is a shame, because it's usable right now. And if all these other buildings aren't usable, why are we just going to get rid of some space that's usable? The Boys and Girls Club is at capacity. They have to turn away kids in town. They're using municipal parking lots to play in. They have to use the building, some of the space at CCP already, the gym. Do you use the cafeteria?
No.
Not yet. But they use a room in the library as well, the community room, because there's no room in their building.
The town library, right?
Correct.
Separate building.
Yeah, correct. So the children are traveling throughout the town center to get their activities done while they're at the club, and the few children that they can allow because they're so small. But if they were given the opportunity to use the back wing of the TCP, the children could literally walk across the parking lot and get there. They don't have to worry about taking a bus. The parents don't have to worry about how long they've been walking on the street to get there if they stop at the store. We don't have to worry about parking at TCP because 6th graders don't drive. It would be a real beneficial use of that space now, so we could help more of the kids in town. And then the other classrooms at about 1,000 square feet apiece. You know, there are scout groups, there's the Lions Club, there are all kinds of community groups, classes, adult and continuing ed that could happen there, that do happen there. And to just take it down for a few people to use seems wrong, in my opinion. We would definitely want it to be multi-purpose. We definitely want it to be a community space, potentially some kind of a co-op going on in the kitchen, so that it could be an incubator kitchen for local businesses trying to start up and get to the point where they can own a business in the center of town. It's really hard to get those things done when you're starting from scratch, so if we had a space that we could go to and pay the town to use it, it would be a lot better than paying another private business owner like we're all doing right now. What else? Did I miss anything? We really focused on TCP. We really did.
I'd like to see what primary would...
We did not perform that. We did not.
Oh, wait, you wanted
I didn't hear the gentleman.
Oh, yeah. Did we say we want to take down?
Give an assessment on the tear down of primary, get real numbers. If it's actually a complete tear down, offered for sale, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. Or just keep it as green space, tear it down, keep it as green space. But I need to see numbers.
You're talking about the old primary?
Yeah.
It was offered for sale and we got no bids.
Yeah, so...
What year?
It's a tear down. Last year.
It was 2000, what's it, 17 now, so it was 2000, was it earlier this year?
Yeah.
So, okay, so it was 7 months ago.
And in 2015, what was it, like $850,000 for tear down was projected in the TAPE?
That was TCP.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
No.
Oh, in TAPE for...
It was about 850 for old primary at TAPE.
Possibly.
120.
Hold on, purse. Don't tell me.
If I could just say something real quick about the financial aspects. These are great ideas, but that's what they are, they're ideas, and they have to be financeable. So I would strongly suggest that a forum be put together so that you could invite commercial lenders in and commercial real estate people in, so that they could advise you about the marketability, if there are people out there. What would it cost to do the RITA? And I've got to tell you, it's going to cost millions to do the RITA for a restaurant. There's so many rules and regulations. It's just, you know, astronomical. So you have to weigh the wish with the practicality of the thing. And the other thing, real quickly, is that we're looking down the barrel of buying a new ladder truck. We've got to do something with the Turkey Hill Middle School. We've got to do something with all of the capital needs. So I, for one, don't want to be placed into a corner. I want to know exactly what all of these things are going to cost, what the effect is going to be, and then we can all make an informed decision.
I was so off on 250 in this report.
Mr. Allen. There were a couple other things that while Steve was talking, I thought.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I thought of them when.
We going to TCP or we going somewhere new?
I can't remember what they were. One of them touches on Group 2. So recently, the state of Massachusetts gave agricultural commissions the right to hold property the same way that conservation commissions do. So if that was something with the Ritter property, because they were saying all that stuff, that would be something to have a discussion with the Agricultural Commission on as well, because that is now a possibility for them to do that.
So they could be a landowner and then through 30B and all those other municipal things, they could do leasing,
yes,
managing, etc.
A thought on the primary building, the old primary building.
Let me go back to your group.
In that demolition part, I assume that you went with a company that would take as much as they could out of it to make money.
Yeah, that would be
Just
part of,
metal the whole bit.
that would be the way that the bid was done.
Then, as far as getting it down to the ground, what's the possibility of having firefighters throughout central Massachusetts do a controlled burn to get the thing down?
That's a dicey proposal, because you have to get DEP approvals, and they do a building test. I mean, it's not impossible, but...
Well, actually, I thought, didn't Scott Glennie at one time, didn't Chief Glennie at one time talk about that?
You have to get rid of all the environmental issues.
Yeah, you have to basically cleanse it, so it can end up costing more than straight demo, because then you've got to clean up all of the hazardous waste from the fire afterwards. But it's...
And I will make I'll just make one pitch.
Community sledgehammer.
Totally, right?
Oh, that's a fundraiser.
Buy a brick. Buy a brick, slam it down.
There you go.
Just as a point of reference, the old primary school is actually the old high school. It was Lunenburg's first high school. So for historical purposes,
What was the wooden building that was in the...
that was the old center school. That was the...
What year were you there, Bob?
4th and 5th grade.
When it was a primary school?
The annex?
No, it was a primary school.
That's right, 62 and 63.
So, I just want to comment on one of the things that Dave just said, is as far as the cost. I too want to know the cost, because I don't think we can make a decision till we know the cost, but at the same time, we can't get costs on every option that we've talked about. That's my problem, because to get cost options, it costs us money. So I think we have to develop a community plan. You know, the assessment is going to give us a lot of information, but then we really have to have more of these kind of discussions and kind of fine-tune it to 1 or 2 options. We can't go in and say, we want a price on 15 different options, because I just don't think we can afford it.
Well, I think that's a reasonable thing. I think part of what this charrette and whatever coming charrettes would do is sort of focus in on some direction, because at some point you have to pick a direction. You have to come up with a way to pay for it, and you have to sell that to town meeting, to the people who voted town meeting, to the people who have to pay for it. And so that this is just sort of the introduction to what might we do. And I think as these sessions go on, this list is going to get smaller, the groups are going to get smaller, and we're going to be dialing in on a more conceptual thought that will focus into a direction of, okay, now what's the actual cost and how do we pay for it? Ms. Adams.
Sorry, this is my passion. While we're doing this, I'm bringing it back to what Bob said with the school needs. As we talk about what we want, I feel like what really always needed to be there was the discussion of what are our municipal needs and identifying those far before we talk about what are our commercial or possible private development needs. There's a lot of really important things that will be up and coming for the town, and if it requires municipal land needs, absolutely should be charretted before we talk about things that are really wishful. If we need a place for a new school and we're doing like off-site land buying like they did with Skyview Middle School in Leominster, that's a huge expense, and then there's a huge loss of like a school campus or downtown environment thing. So I really wish we would charrette about what are our municipal land needs for 5, 10, 50 years from now, so we establish how these parcels that may or may not be part of a commercial enterprise may or may not be needed by the town. Sorry, I'm just totally obsessed with this.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's all part of the
And I feel like
equation.
that needs to be charretted too, if that's even a word.
I guess
It's probably not a bird.
Okay, so that's a discussion for a different time.
Yeah, I guess my question is, you know, with the charrette is what do you think should happen? To me, the school question is really the school needs to answer that. I mean, they are the best to answer that. What they have 20-year population projections, and they can tell us, I mean, we can't tell the school what they need. I mean, the school needs to tell us what they need.
Well, and the school doesn't actually tell us what they need. The MSBA tells the school what they need, and then they come and say, this is what the MSBA says.
Right, but and that's the selectmen have started that conversation with the school. Is what do you foresee for TCP for Turkey Hill for X amount of time, and what are your long-range plans? Because honestly, it's really not up to us. It's the educational requirements, like Bob was talking in during our discussion, is the accreditation needs, which is one of the driving factors of the high school tear down. And unfortunately, I don't know that any of us have a crystal ball, but I think the school is better informed to tell us what the accreditation requirements are going to be in 10, 15 years, or what they're moving towards. So I'm not sure that a charrette is necessarily the right format for that, but I think the question is crucial. And I think the question and answering that question before we move forward is very important.
Okay, I'm going to go to Troy, and then I'm going to refocus us.
So, two things. One is, one of the things that we hear a lot about is that people cannot afford to stay in Lunenburg, that they can't afford the taxes, and that we need some more commercial base. And so we have to talk about that in the same context of what the schools need. The second thing is that everything up here says that we need change, and I agree with Mr. Rogers in that we need to reach out to some business people and to some developers to say, what is the viability? This is what our town has said we want and we need, and how do we get there? And
reach out to farmers and artists and see if there's interest.
Okay, so
there is from artists.
I think we're seeing some similar themes. I think we're seeing some opposing views. I think that's kind of what this whole process is about. Now, we all did a quick thought exercise. I think it didn't have the intended focus to kind of get people out of specific buildings, but I want to go back to that, and I want us to just go around the room and say one or two things that you put down in that you feel make a place someplace that you want to be. A physical feature, a feeling, something that put them down, and then we can kind of focus on how that applies to what we've talked about and what we have. I think we're all familiar with what we have. Who wants to start? All right, we'll start with Dave, and we'll just go around the room from there.
My first thought when you said to think about a place that you've been to that you really enjoyed was very similar to the small town that was spoken about earlier in New York. Stockbridge, Massachusetts, of all places, out in Western Mass. My daughter is one who will drive 25 miles and get a great cup of coffee first thing in the morning. We were in Lee, Mass. We drove to Stockbridge early in the morning. We had to wait for the store to open. But there were people already milling around. They have a post office there, and it's right off of the main drag, so it's a walkable area. Very similar. The primary property would be smaller than what Stockbridge's walkable area is, but similar to that. You've got a main drag that goes right through Stockbridge, but you've got these offshoots where there's small boutiques, coffee shops, there's living space above all of these shops, and you have a small bank, post office, and we sat there for an hour and a half and just watched the world go by, and it was fantastic. The locals come and greet each other to grab their coffee and scones or whatever, and their daily business. So that's the dream I see. Difficult to do, I think difficult to do in Lunenburg because it didn't build up the same way that Stockbridge did initially.
No, but I don't think we're necessarily looking for like, we're just looking for feelings and thoughts. You, young lady.
Basically, the same idea that this gentleman had. I would like a walkable downtown area, one that is not congested with traffic. So I know we do need parking, but maybe if we could have parking on the outside of the town, but then less traffic in the center. I've really been enjoying the Dragonfly Cafe to stop for coffee. I always run into someone there, so I'm really happy about that business. My concern, I like the idea of this small town that this gentleman was talking about, but I feel we could have a taste of that in Lunenburg, but I think if we kept the buildings that we have under our town control, we would have control over what goes into that town. It's a long way coming. We have wonderful ideas, but I think selling anything off scares me. I think we have to, the cost is important.
Okay. What about you?
I agree, I don't want to sell things.
Right now, I just want to talk about physical and what makes you feel good.
A small community with arts and little shops and places for people to gather. And I think if you have enough variety, it will bring people, more likely to bring people into the town.
What about you, Bob?
So, walking around Concord, Mass.
Okay.
There's a bookstore, there's restaurants, there's bars, there's ice cream stores, there's the National Park, there's parking off the street. That's the feel I'd like, is to be able to walk and not worry about Route 2A being so fast, or Main Street being too fast, or Lancaster Ave being too fast, or Leominster Road being too fast.
Okay. I can't get you National Park, but I might be able to help you with that.
We're at someone, right? What are you talking about?
I'm going to go with ditto.
Okay.
That's what I want.
Mr. McQueen.
The Red Lion Inn out in Stockbridge.
My parents really love that place. Yeah.
What was that?
They used to go there every
The Red Lion Inn. Right in the center of town. They got a huge courtyard.
Did it close?
All right.
I can make the house I'm in.
You can make
I make a mean breakfast.
You're right within the district. You could do a bed and breakfast.
I make a mean breakfast.
What time can you do?
You don't do the bed and breakfast, just do the Red Lion Inn. And get a harvest.
All right. I'm sorry, Paul, I skipped you.
The things that a lot of it has already been said, but I like walking areas that don't allow automobiles. I'd like to see a playground with, Newburyport has a lot of areas that, flower boxes and a lot of planting to beautify the town center. And I also they have numerous restaurants, and all of them have outdoor seating, which is huge for me. I love to sit outside when I'm eating, so I'd love to see something like that in the center. And, people have already said it, quaint, unique shops, and I'd like an area to have things like festivals, and they have just about every other week in the summer, they have different vendor booths and vendor fairs all throughout the town center, and then they have summer concerts.
How long since we gave Turkey Hill Gardeners a shout out? They do a good job.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job. That's true.
All right, now we're coming to this table. We're going to start with the purple shirt. I'm sorry, I don't know a lot of names.
Yeah, that's fine. I like purple shirt.
Okay. Small, quaint, walkable, but also easy to get to, because we keep talking about walkable, but there aren't that many houses nearby, so people do need a place to park and a way to get into the center of town. I would really strongly feel that there should be a municipal presence to anchor the town. I think that's important. And if for some reason it's not viable to have town hall and town hall, I think the building should absolutely stay and could be turned into something like a town property where we lease it out, like a general store kind of thing with booths and consigners or antiques or stuff like that. Okay. But I think a nice variety of businesses is important.
Phillipston. Phillipston has their town hall was turned into a semi-restaurant deli.
That's cool.
Commercial.
I didn't know that. I haven't been there.
The Lunenburg, Germany Town Hall has a bar on the first floor.
This is...
There you go.
Is it accessible?
Do they want to be accessible after you've been drinking?
Yes, and I personally want as big of a town park as we can possibly create. I think outdoor space is really important. As a mother, I like to bring my kids out of my backyard, which, as much as I love it, is very limited. So I like to bring them out into the community. We go to we call it the Rainbow Playground, what is it, King's Kingdom, whatever it's called. I bring them there a lot. One thing that I could say could change about that is, like, put more trees. It's very hot there in the summertime, and there's no shade, and there's no seating. But like, but I also want more of a multifunctional outdoor space, right? Because I take them to Kids Kingdom or Kings, whatever it's called, the Rainbow Playground. I take them there, and they run off and play, and then if I can sit, I sit, and there's not much for me to do, and for them it's the playground and that's it, right? So having a more multifunctional space with a splash pad or a pool, probably a splash pad, but things like that are gonna bring more people to that space. Walking trails, whatever, stuff like that. Okay. But a big space. But then I want to be able to hang out there for a couple of hours and then walk, 2 blocks and get myself a sandwich.
Yeah.
Or a beer.
I think it's on top right both.
I really like what we have right now, to be honest with you. I think it's got everything. Having lived on Highland Street, our kids could walk to Marshall Park, could go down to Marshall Pond to skate, to walk to school. I mean, I think there's a lot offered, and traffic begets problems. The last thing I want to see is, for instance, a redone Passios school for us, for the town, and a vacant Ritter building, and the town hall that we don't know what to do with. And I want people to focus in on, if we stay in the Ritter or the town hall, it's going to be a cost. And there's also going to be a cost, pretty much the same kind of cost, if we decide for whatever reason to lease it up. We've got to go through both of those buildings and spend a lot of money. Now, someone said, well, give it to them for $1 and what have you. It just doesn't work, because it's so expensive to retrofit these buildings and the costs. And there are.
I didn't say that we would assume that.
I know they would.
Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. It's very difficult to finance that kind of a thing. That's why I think we need to have a financial perspective sometime.
Okay, Carl.
I think we get mostly the walkability, most of the things up there. I think I like to go to places that have very interesting architecture, particularly New England, but which is sort of what Dave was saying. I like the direction we are right now. I hate to see us take the edge of that with too much, commercial development. I think it would lose its charm, and I'm not sure that residents can support that much. And I don't envision not having it very busy, having it walkable, not much traffic, which means not focusing on how do we bring more people into Lunenburg. I'm really not particularly interested in bringing more people into Lunenburg, into the town center, because we'll lose a lot of that, because you'll need even more parking and more cars and more traffic. Kind of like what we got, we can improve on it, we can make it a little bit more friendly, a little bit more open space. But those are mine. Okay.
So I wrote down in the actual space, I've always been kind of jealous of Townsend's little common there. And I think something like that, or Bolton just made a similar type of thing on 117, and it seems easy to take care of, easy to have pretty much anything there. And yeah, and now that I'm a father, I've started going to a lot of these events, and you kind of meet people that I don't know that I never really knew lived in town, and that's cool. And yeah, that's my spot.
Anthony?
So I like what Bob said about Concord. It's a nice place, but we don't have the affluence or the population density. If anyone's ever been to Turner Falls, the whole Bridge of Flowers thing, I'm not saying we do that, and that's a bit over the top, but it's a beautiful place, right? It's rural Massachusetts. There's no reason we couldn't be, I don't say just like that, but to do something nicer than what we have now. Because I do like what we have now, but it just, right? The other thing was, if you drive down 2A, I've told the people this for years, I say, where do you live? And I go, you're driving down 2A, and there's that sign that says attractions, and there's nothing on it, that's where we live, right? And there's no reason why. Obviously, something used to be here at one time.
Whalen Park.
Right? Was that the only thing on that sign?
Yes.
Right? Either take it down, right? Or let's put a reason for that sign to be there, right? And I'm not saying, a splash pad's going to be, the reason.
Park.
But, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying that, but just to give something, we're not a destination, right? We're like, I was telling her earlier, we're like Radiator Springs, right? You just kind of pass through on your way to Fitchburg or somewhere else. People say, I drive through your town on the way to New Hampshire. Do you stop? Why would I stop, right? Give a reason to stop. There's not even anywhere to stop, but that's neither here nor there. So,
We can't sell cheap beer, though.
Sure. But yeah, no, I think, Bob, what you said, I'm totally down with that sort of idea, but on a much smaller scale.
Katie?
So is this Where's My Happy Place?
Yes.
Nicest day I had this fall, Sturbridge Village. But for real, it's beautiful historic buildings surrounded by a gigantic open space. And it's like that because it was somebody's playground of creating what they wanted their village to look like. It was, these business owner families started collecting houses instead of antiques. But when you're there, to feel the charm of, you go into their town halls that they've collected, and you go inside and it's still historic. I think we could, when we renovate some of our buildings, bring back that charm to them, and that in of itself will make the space nicer. So town hall might look pretty on the outside. I don't know what happens once you go in there. It's just, there's nothing, So I feel like when we do renovate, if we have an image or if we want to feel more colonial or historic, to put the money into also bringing that aesthetic to be part of it.
Can I just mention real quickly, in each of the areas that we've talked about, like Sturbridge Village, in Concord, there's Concord Academy, which is a big economic thing. The Norman Rockwell Museum. I mean, there is always something that's a draw. Okay?
Yeah, but I think what we're trying to do right now is just get a general sense of where people are. We're not trying to... This right here isn't reality. This is feelings and aesthetics and concepts that will help shape how reality happens.
But just to build on that, though, I mean, like you said, you go to Groton, right? You go to Groton, right? You have
Lawrence.
Oh my God. Groton School. We have no anchor store here. I think it was like a mall.
Johnson's
What's our anchor? Walmart? Right? Is that what we want to be? I don't think so.
But maybe that's just who we are. We're just us.
Damon?
So, we try not to sound too much like an architect, but to build on the walkable part of things, to be walkable, you need destinations, you need places to walk to. And that can be a use that you're walking to, but also human beings love having a destination that they can visibly see. I mean, Town Hall does a great job of that for us now. You can see that from Memorial Drive, you can see it from Main Street, you can see it from Lancaster Ave. That's a great landmark, but it's kind of in the center. But if we had landmarks looking down those ways too, that people could identify and want to walk to, or uses that they want to walk to, that all adds to the walkability of it. And just a separate note, I read a really interesting article the other day. New technology, they actually put pictures in front of people and track their retinas to see what parts of the pictures they looked at. So they're using it in terms of architecture to try to see what features people liked. But they looked at windows and kind of features on the buildings, but the thing that people looked at the most was other people in the photograph. It didn't matter what the building looked like. So if you want to create a place that people like or are interested by, you want to create a place with more people that's stimulating. So it's kind of a self-feeding thing.
Okay. Maureen?
So the place that I thought of was actually the Wayland District circa 1990 maybe, somewhere in that 10-year time period. I could walk to amusement park. I could walk to an arcade. I could walk to an ice cream shop. I could walk to a convenience store. All these places at the age of 7 to 13, I could walk around with no problem. It was safe. It wasn't too busy at the time. I mean, now Wayland Road is way different, and so is Electric Ave. But there were things to do, there were places to go, there were other people at those places, like Damon is saying. There was a playground, there's basketball courts at the time, there's a softball field, there was...
We're working on that.
Yes, I'm with you. But there was a lot of things to do in a small area, and it was safe to get to those places on foot.
So I really took your question seriously, and I didn't think about Lunenburg or any of, like, I just like places that are bright and cheerful when I'm inside, and I like places that are open and fresh when I'm outside. I grew up here, and I loved it here, but I couldn't get away fast enough when I was in high school, so I went to Miami, and I felt like I was in a big city, and I got to know all kinds of people from all over the world. And after about 4 years, I was ready to come back because this was the place that I wanted to be. And the town has changed a lot. And I brought my kids back here, and it's not what it was when I was growing up here. There's not a lot for kids. There's not a lot for families. Please give Whalum a break. Stop putting people in Whalum. Like, it's outrageous. It is outrageous. I know that growth is important, but to put everybody in one space is a burden for the people that have been there. It's taxing, it's exhausting, and with less and less for people to do and be involved in, that growth is kind of just suffocating. So, you know, I think the center does need open spaces, it needs multifunctional spaces, because it's the spot that the families are in, whether the kids are in school, families are passing through. And I just, so when you asked the question, I didn't think about what my vision for the center is. I thought about the places I like to be, but then listening to everybody, ultimately at the end of the day, all these discussions are about what we want our space to be for ourselves and our families.
But the idea was to get you out of Lunenburg and reframe what you want, and then it helps you look at these
And did
other
you mention
things.
Townsend, their town green? Phenomenal. And the things that that town does to bring people together throughout the year, good weather, bad weather, the little organizations that they have, all the community, Pepperell Grange, all these communities around us that have held on to those things that bring people together, that give people a reason to gather, that aren't destination things either. They're not like, oh, well, we have the best fried clams this side of the Cape. It's not about that. It's about bringing the people in your community together instead of bringing people from the outside, like you said. And that's what I'd like to see.
I think the biggest thing for me is the architecture. And there are a few buildings that I've gone in my life, and they're just the same. And that Ritter building, after all these years, you walk through the doors, it smells the same. Exactly the same. Like, I could be 8 years old and walk through that door, and it's the same smell. And I really, that's really good. I appreciate it. You know, and I think as a community, you have to appreciate that and realize that some things can stay the same, and it's not a bad thing. You know, this past fall, early fall, I think it was, they did the farmer's market, and I brought my team of horses up to the center of town, and we did horse-drawn wagon rides. And you wouldn't believe the expression on people's faces when you pull up to a stoplight with a team of horses. And it was just really cool, and it drew a fair amount of people, considering the weather was horrible. We were standing outside in the rain for the first hour. But, you know, I'd just like to see more of that. And I think those properties in the center of town, although they need a lot of work, or maybe rightfully so should be torn down in the case of the primary school, it's an opportunity for us to truly control what goes on in that space. And if you say you want more business in town and you want to have a draw for people, why not use these spaces and be able to really manage the situation versus turning them over to private developers that, you know, might put another Emerald Place in. So.
Ryan, I really compare ourselves to Sterling. Sterling's a drive-through community. It's black and white buildings. I grew up in Sterling on the Leominster line, and I always went to Leominster. Now I live in Lunenburg, and I always go to Leominster. It's the shopping, it's the restaurants.
Splash pad?
We're lacking, yeah, there's splash. We're lacking an attraction. but I don't think we'll ever get that attraction. We're always going to be a drive-through community. Sterling does a great job with their buildings, but they also have regionalized schools. So their budget, they could probably do that. I'm totally on board with doing more community-based activities. The mayor of Leominster does summer strolls downtown, blocked off downtown. If we could have a downtown that could be blocked off. He does a cannoli fest, and he just did his winter stroll because he was getting the small businesses really didn't get the people there, so he kind of brought the people in. And I think it's just a good. We could do something like that with more space, but like Carl said, like not. I don't want to have this huge mecca of like.
Yeah, you want to do something that serves the people that live here.
Yeah, bring an ag. I'm trying to bring ag out to the people. I get questions every day of like, where can I buy this? Where can I get this? And our town's full of a great variety of everything, and it's good just to use what we have. But let's do that.
Hi. I have to second Tanner's point. We picked this community because it was quiet and quintessential New England sort of old town hall and structures, and it was proxemic to places that had big box stores and close to Route 2 and 495 without being in that stuff. I will say that, has anyone ever looked at putting parallel parking on any of the main drags in town? I know there is some, but not much. I'd like to slow traffic down on 2A, add parking that everyone keeps saying we need so much of. I live right in the center of town, and people fly through. If it's green light, it's like scary.
Yeah, unfortunately, the state controls the road.
Sure, so can we talk to
don't have a lot of, we can try. DOT is not super receptive to design ideas.
Air has on-street parking on 2A in the center, and
Concord has on-street parking on 2A.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a,
I have a feeling
foreign
Air's
concept.
existed for quite a while because of the way their downtown came up. I mean, it's certainly something we can raise. I don't know what the reality is. Yeah.
We also, some of those towns that Route 2A is not official at that part, through like the state highway ends at this point, that happens through the state. And so the local community takes it on. And we also, at special town meeting, we just voted to have the ability to reduce the speed limit on a state highway with DOT. And we can talk to our state reps and our senators to see what we can do.
Thank you. Phyllis.
I actually have to agree with Dave Rogers. I know. Believe it or not.
Does anybody have some oxygen for CPR. Yeah. Thank God somebody knew it.
I like Lunenburg. When we were first married, we lived in Danvers for about 12 years. Great shopping, great bars, great restaurants. Tremendous traffic. We tried not to leave the house on the weekends. There was so much traffic. So then we moved out to a town where it took you had to drive 15 miles to get milk. Now, there wasn't any traffic, but there wasn't any milk either. So we moved to Lunenburg, where without having all of that stuff in the town, in 2 miles I can be in Shirley at the dry cleaners. In 6 miles I can be at Market Basket. But all of that stuff isn't in the town. The town is rural and lovely. I like the architecture. I wish the center was more walkable. I'm surprised I don't get hit just trying to cross the street to go to a BOS meeting. So I would like it to be more walkable. I enjoy the architecture. We have lakes. We went for a walk on the Lane property the other day. We go off on the Cowdrey. The town has very many beautiful spaces for us, and I really appreciate living here.
John?
I've lived in a few different places, so I thought of Weston, Missouri, which is another tiny little town out on the Missouri River. It's old, it's vibrant, lots of shops, antiques, stores and bookstores. I thought of Oswego, New York, another place very similar in that it's got a little river, which we're never going to get, shops, antiques, restaurants. And then I thought about Air, one of our local towns here. And,
I thought of their center where they've got, once again, restaurants, they have a rail trailer, that's great, and some shops, but all of them have sidewalks. And I think we are really ill-served by not having better connections on sidewalks in the town center.
And last but not least, Mr. Toll.
I really came here tonight intending to just listen and not speak, but
We want to hear.
well, it's such a historic evening because I have to say I agree with Mr. Rogers as well in a way.
I would have followed
Paula, get ready. No, I don't think it's realistic to say we're going to make anybody, and when I say we, because I have to go back for a second, but we're going to make this a destination town. It's not going to happen. All right? I want this town to be, and I'm choosing my words carefully, I want it to be a town that services the people that live in it, that makes the people that live in it real happy to live here and they get what they want. But my caveat is I don't think the government can do that. It's got to be passionate people, whether it's passionate citizens, a la Wallace Park, or passionate businesses, a la I want to buy something and create it. It's got to be a groundswell. And I think the role of government is to get out of their way, all right, or to enable them. Maybe even better than getting out of their way, to enable them, to make sure that what we have is, in terms of infrastructure or rules or whatever, is enabling. But I do want you to think about one thing, and it's not what I want, it's what is. I think the center of town has shifted. You think traditionally as the center of town hall and going out. We have a jewel in the building we're in right now, and it kind of radiates from here. We have this beautiful campus. Memorial Drive is kind of where all our services live right now in terms of the senior center, the library, the teen, the Boys and Girls Club, etc. And the playground. And, parking, walkability, easier to do there. Okay? What I don't want to happen is to have the one building that's sitting in the middle of it become a blighted old primary. Now, you want to tear it down? If that's what the town wants, fine. But I don't want it to be an old primary sitting in the middle of this jewel. All right? I was on the Building and Reuse Committee for 4 years. Our first plan was make it work in Town Hall because Town Hall is here and that's what it has to be. It didn't work. My next plan that I fell in love with was the Ritter. We'll put another wing on the Ritter, it'll look like the White House, it'll be fantastic. We found out that didn't work. The reason we started there were twofold. And I'm trying to get off the soapbox here, but I have 2 points to make. One was we wanted to maintain the historic town hall. The other was we felt the Passios was the most saleable. So we went into it saying, let's put everything in town hall and let's sell the one that's most saleable. We came full circle to say the Passios is the most usable. It's in the middle of our current campus. But what do we do with the rest of it? And that's the dilemma we all have right now. I don't have an answer. Okay, but I think the work we're all doing and the work that the town is beginning to wrestle with is what is the center of town? What do we want it to be? I think it's naive to think we're going to make this Newburyport. We're not Newburyport. We don't have an ocean. We don't have a lot of boats. And, we're not doing
I don't think we can make
it.
No,
and we're not going to make it Sturbridge Village. And we're not going to make it a destination site. But let's make it a cool place to live. I think it already is. That's where I agree with Mr. Rogers. But let's do whatever we can to make it more enjoyable and more livable. That's all. And I still am here to listen, not to talk.
Can I just say 2 things? First of all, I got from this conversation that people have enjoyed the festivals that we've had, like the Stillman fair that we have. That really brought the people out. Why couldn't we coordinate having the same kind of thing that the police did on Memorial Drive and bring it all the way around and have all kinds of different things as a festival that we can really market, and we could do the same kind of thing over, where the historical business, the historical spot is, and do the same thing down on the lakefront. I remember when we had a big fundraising thing when Kevin Sozik passed away, God rest his soul. We took over all of that area, and it was great. We had kids, jumping in those things, and I mean, we could have these movable festivals that would be really something for our town and our community, and have some organization benefit from it, and be a way of raising money, getting together, and just expanding on that thing. We could have the first annual Lunenburg putting contest over at the driving range, that little thing. I mean, there's hundreds of things we could do in that regard, just to bring people together. So that's what I get from this discussion. Part of the things. I mean, I don't want that's the only thing. I think this is a great people.
Communications
Yeah.
got to be stepped up.
Yeah.
All avenues should be used, whether we like it or not. Sorry.
But this is a good thing, though, I think.
Absolutely.
I mean,
More of these, social media, anything.
And thank you to the selectmen for doing this. This is, this is a good thing. But I mean that sincerely.
All right, any last thoughts?
What's the next step?
Gathering more information?
I mean, I think it's synthesizing what we've got here into common themes, and then sort of trying to refocus for a second discussion session like this, and trying to, get more specific about what those common themes are, how they're achieved, and what the steps are to start moving forward with that. I mean, that's just my initial thoughts after this evening. I mean, I think this went a little bit differently than maybe was originally intended, but I think that there's been a lot of good discussion and information. So it's really the selectmen's meeting, so I don't know if they have thoughts on how this happens
One
next.
question I have that I think a number of the groups have is, when do we expect, what's the timeline for the building assessment?
Within the next 2 months.
So we should have the answers within the next couple of months? Yeah. I think that's a really important data point that we need, that's going to determine where we go with these discussions.
And gathering the various questions here, talking to the school. We also need to talk about what Katie was talking about, other municipal uses. So when we talked about consolidating space and what space needs, we need to think about, well, how long is the proposed town hall expansion or consolidation of existing uses, how long is that going to be good for? Because it's going to be good for 10 years or it's going to be for 20 years?
Yeah.
The other things that we want to do in town, what do we need for open space? We have an open space plan. Is it time to be updated? Other things like that. So
it is. It's expired.
So the fact is that this is part of the entire town future. So I think this is going to be a continual process. Whether we're going to get something for the May town meeting would be ideal, but if we still need to get more information, it may not be the May town meeting.
So I'd like people's feedback. Is what do you guys think is the next step? Do we have another charrette and try to expand it? Or do we wait for the building assessment and then do another charrette? Or what do people think?
I'll jump in and tell you that I think there's a big segment of this town that's very important for a whole host of different reasons, and that's the senior citizen and those that soon will be. I think we've got to find out what they like, what they don't like, what they need, what they don't need, and to bring them in.
We need to do a road show.
Sorry?
We need to do a road show.
Well, just go to the Eagle House,
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I agree like that at the Eagle House.
Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it is, in reality, with the assessments that are going on, there are 2 buildings that we really don't need any assessment on, and that's the Brooks House and the primary building. So in the next couple of months, if we focused on those 2 buildings, you might have something to bring to May town meeting that people can vote on and say yay or nay. I mean, to think about what we're going to do with the town hall or with the Ritter building or TC Passio is really hung up on these assessment plans. Now the Brooks House, the one suggestion I had, the other suggestion they had was tear it down, plant a tree.
See, I love that building.
And I said,
I don't agree with that.
as far as I'm concerned, my point is, even if you sell it for $1, sell it for 50 cents, sell it for a penny, as long as you move it. Take it someplace. You can do what the heck you want to do. As far as turning around with it as the primary building, if we have the money to take it down, take it down. You've got all that open space, now you can hold a Bolton Fair there if you feel like it. Or if you get rid of the Brooks House, take the gazebo that you got there and put it where the Brooks House once was. Now you have all this room, you got parking, you got accessibility, people drive right by it. You can have whatever party you want. Or you could have two gazebos.
Gazebo and building.
I'm just saying, yeah. But it's just, I think you gotta get focused. If we're gonna keep on going with the...
Still the old BNC.
Still the original. Yeah. If we're gonna keep on going with the shotgun effect, you're never gonna focus down on anything. And nothing will get done, it'll just keep on perpetuating till buildings fall apart. I guess I'll go out of my comfort zone and I'll look into that Smile Amazon thing to see if we can come up with money other than taxes to...
But I think we have to develop, personally, my feeling is we need a town-wide plan. I don't think we should do it piecemeal. I think we need to come up with a plan.
It is going to be a whole town-wide, but what can you do right now? What can you do now? This very second.
Personally, I think buildings are part of the assessment. Yeah.
But we know we're not going to keep them.
Well, I don't agree with you, we know that. My husband, before I came here tonight, he would absolutely love to keep the primary. So I think this group may agree that the primary has to go.
Yeah, you can buy it.
We haven't talked about one small segment, and what we said is we're going to come up with a plan and bring it back to the town to vote on. And I think that's what our responsibility is.
And I think if we had more meetings like we had this one tonight, it would snowball, more people would get involved. We talked about citizens becoming passionate. If we continue a dialogue like this, I think more people would step up. And the more people you have, the better, more ideas.
That was one of the goals, to increase participation around the topic. To build a consensus on this.
I think one of the things that would be very helpful is if we can find a way to pull a group meeting together, another charrette, whatever it be, to concentrate on one property at a time so that we try to draw in those people that have other ideas for, say, the primary property. You're right. This group here basically agrees that it should come down. Not totally, but more or less the majority says it should come down. If there are people out there that have a proposal, not a complete plan, but a proposal in their mind of a different type of use for that property, we sort all that out in one meeting instead of trying to do all this at one time and do those one at a time. And I agree with Mr. McQuaid that the primary property and the Brooks House are the two that we can really work with at this point, because they're not tied up in this reconfiguration or non-reconfiguration of town offices. We've got a little more flexibility because we're looking for new uses rather than the existing uses for those two pieces.
So more targeted charrettes is what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
I'd be also interested to mention meeting with the seniors. I think, to me, it'd be good to go to the other end of the spectrum too and maybe meet with the National Honor Society kids or something like that, because when you think about it, the people walking around the center of town using it the most are the kids who go to school here.
Sure.
So it'd be very important to understand what they would like to see.
Yeah. Maybe a teen center.
Good point.
A meeting at the senior center, a meeting at the teen center. And I also think we've heard a lot about the farmers. I think talking to the farmers, what are they really interested in, and what do they see, and what would they like?
And the artists.
And the artists.
And I see two different things. Like, there's a burden of moving forward with the building part of it, but then there's the culture part of it, and that should be separated from this, because that can be worked on either through the Cultural Commission or other people. None of this should prohibit seeing if we need festivals or fairs, or our sense of community should be separated from all of this stress. Because my neighbor who couldn't make it tonight because she was sick, she talked so much about a lot of this attracting private business will happen if we have a really attractive sense of culture. And so I think there's like two totally separate things really tied in here together. And if we're really, I mean, I like it the way it is, and I'm happy here. But if there's ways to really enhance the community part of Lunenburg, get it back to that sort of old school bonfire thing that a lot of us liked, and it becomes known more for all of those things, that could be attractive to people.
And I think to that point goes to Jamie's point that some things the town can't do. That some things need a champion. The town can help, can get out of the way, can facilitate some of those things, but like Stillman's Fair, which everybody loves, thousands of people go to, the town just kind of shows up and helps out. The DPW, the police, the fire, they go and they help them coordinate, they help make them safe, they bring their equipment, but the Lions Club does, pun intended, the lion's share of the organizing. So a lot of those things, maybe the Cultural Council has a role, but there's also other community groups, and maybe the community group that organizes some of these things doesn't exist yet.
And again, sorry,
No,
maybe
that's
why
okay.
it is connected is because maybe we're missing that actual space. And maybe it does all tie back to this.
I'll just say, as a member of the Cultural Council, we are working on some more events in town, and right now, starting the process of an artisan's fair.
Great.
Can I say one?
Sorry.
To make sure next time we have a charrette, there's somebody from the school board or whoever the powers that be, Loxy or whoever, is here and armed with their projected space needs.
Sure.
Well, we can ask them.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to tell Loxy to go anywhere.
I'll talk to her.
Can I just, while you're still standing there, I find it really kind of intriguing that we came up with all these multi-million-dollar ideas over here, and then you said go to your happy place, and those are all fairly reasonable, could be accomplished without a ton of work.
Well, the walkability is a multi-million-dollar idea.
I mean, I'm saying most of that stuff.
Yes, but a lot of it is soft stuff. A lot of it is more organizational stuff that is human infrastructure as opposed to physical infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's the point Katie was getting to with, the two really can be separated from each other.
Yeah.
If it's decided that we should sit down and crunch these numbers with the appropriate people, I would suggest that we have a resource in town that's probably one of the best in New England, and that's Alan Foster, who's a MAI appraiser, which it's a high designation member of the Appraisal Institute, and he's lived here. He knows the area, and he would be a resource to ask in conjunction with the financial end of things, the feasibility of things, and I'm sure that he would come to something like this, and I would, if it's a consensus of the Board of Selectmen, I'd be happy to make that ask and get him to come, because he's a good guy and he's a wealth of knowledge. So I just offer that as something out there.
The other thing is, I think some people have talked about what other communities are doing, like Shrewsbury and some other things that are doing these kind of collaboratives. I think maybe reaching out to them and find out how are they making these things happen, how are they financing this, how did they get started, doing some research, and maybe having them come in and present and then do a charrette.
Sure. I think this has been great.
Thank you for giving us.
Emily, I have to run, but it was really nice meeting all you guys.
Pat, nice